Hi, and welcome to our Young Prophets Chat. We're so excited that you guys can join us online. I have been waiting to do this interview. It's so exciting because for all us leaders, we need to learn how to communicate better. And as today, I learned how to communicate a little better myself. And so we want to welcome Fred and Anna Kendall, who are the founders of the Life Languages that are in 6 continents right now. And you have over 500 people that are trained in this, which is amazing. Certified trainers. And then you guys have been on different television shows, Dr. Phil, Good Morning America. Just so many things. Did you guys start Maranatha Bookstore?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. And then also Family Restoration Network, Life Care Hospital and Therapy Centers. And what I wanted to show was this book. We are going to advertise this one right now. It's called Speaking of Love, Learn the 7 Behavioral Life Languages of Highly Effective Communication. And so when you guys went to write this, what was kind of behind it, the writing of it?
Well, it sort of goes back to we started understanding the life languages or learning about them, trying to communicate. And then Fred recalled some of his Marine Corps experiences because he was in the Marine Corps for 11 and a half years. So when I married him, I married Major Dad. And it was like his purpose was to shape me up. And my purpose was to resist. So we had major communication issues. But tell about how you came up with the categories.
Well, one of the things that I had noticed in the Marine Corps was that, well, particularly when we were overseas or in any kind of a threatened or combat situation, there were those who wanted to think it through first. There were those who would get emotional first. And then there were those who would just act first. And you kind of had to give some, as I learned that, I began to give consideration to assignments based on that. Those who act first, sometimes it's a great idea to have them as a point person leading a group, but the danger is they'll just charge ahead and get killed.
Wow.
The advantage is they'll charge ahead and draw live rounds, and it warns you and everybody else. So there are those who think, and they plan things. And then there are those who feel, and you really need to know them because they have a lot of energy. But also, if one of those who has strong feelings, especially, receives a letter from home and they have a girlfriend back home or a wife back home or whatever back home, you want to assign a fire team leader and a group of people to be with them because if it's bad news, they fall apart. If they're emotional.
So Fred brought this information into our marriage, and we were having marital problems. We've been married a few years, and it was just tough. You know, those when you're dating, this is what we've discovered. Now, we have discovered the 7 communication styles. There's 7 different communication styles. And if you can speak all 7 of them, you can speak to anybody in the world.
Wow.
And you can recognize those. In the dating or the early marriage years.
Now, that is if you also have a common language.
Cultural language.
Cultural language.
Okay.
Instantly, you don't speak Japanese, so.
Just because you're the same.
Yeah,
yes.
that's good.
Yeah. But in the early years, you're multilingual. You like everything he likes, and he likes everything you like. And then after a couple of years of marriage, you think, who are you? You know, you used to like everything I liked. I don't even know you now. So we had hit that stage.
Yeah.
And then Fred remembered the 3 categories.
Wow.
So he said, Anna, you feel first. And he said, our son thinks first. And he said, I act first. Wow. So that's how we started with the 3 categories. And then in learning to use those and understand them better, then we started seeing differences in those categories. And ultimately, we came up with the 7.
Wow.
And what I had noticed in the Marine Corps were those who were very emotional. Wow. And when those who are very emotional had something going on that would stir up their emotions, like a death of a buddy or a bad letter from home, they needed to have people to comfort them.
That's good.
And then I noticed there were those who were deep thinkers. And I noticed one of the things was that most everybody that had made the grade of major or above, or who had made Sergeant E5, E6 or above, they were usually thinkers to a large degree.
Wow.
And I noticed that I wasn't. And I got
Fred
to
was
thinking,
the action guy.
I got to thinking, I'm not going to get past this rank I'm at,
But you
which at
did.
that time was first lieutenant. So I began to give thought to how to give the appearance that I'm a deep thinker, and I'm not just all words and all action.
Wow.
So when he got out of the Marine Corps, he was a major. So he did accomplish that. So, but anyway, back to our book, we had the 3 categories. We had come up with a number of languages under each category, and it had saved our marriage and our family. So we knew it was time to pass it on.
Wow.
Wow.
That's really good.
That is really good for leaders.
And you know what was the thing that really helped us do it was our son.
Yeah.
He was so difficult. And
He was emotions.
no,
No, he was a thinker.
He was the thinker.
Okay.
cognitive. And he was so difficult. If no matter what you said to him, he had to think about it. And he got lots of thoughts.
And,
I might be that person.
well, and think about this action father who wanted instant obedience
done.
and action. And then he had this influencer mother who wanted to just encourage him and challenge him and give him solutions. And he wanted to think about things. And we'd think, what's wrong with him?
And
So-
you know, we would go like on a trip. And sometimes the main trip that we took was either to Oklahoma or New Mexico to see our parents or mine. That was kind of lengthy. So I would try to help them be prepared for the trip. And I would explain to Anna, you go in, give them a credit card, and then you look around for anything you want us to take with us to nibble on. Michael, you get out and start gassing the car up. And you can tell them they have a credit card. They can put, when he stops pumping gas, they can put it on the credit card.
Wow.
And I'll check under the hood, and if nobody else says, I'll walk the dog, because we almost always had a dog with us. Neither of them could do those 2 simple tasks.
Aww.
We would stop the car, and Michael is still looking for his shoes. I would go in to pay for things, and I get busy talking to people. And Fred is out there, just so those are just little tiny things that grew into big problems. But as we started understanding, it's about communication. And you
good.
see how easily we talk. We thought we could communicate. Talking doesn't mean you can communicate.
Wow.
See, you have to learn how to communicate. And when we don't understand one another, we tend to judge each other.
Well, I looked back to my days
So
in the Marine
good.
Corps, and I knew that communication had to do with a common union. When we in the Marine Corps, as a unit, whether it was a fire team of 4 people, a fire team leader and 3 men, or a squad, or a platoon, or a company, or a battalion, if you don't have a common union,
Yeah.
common connection, and common purpose, you're not communicating.
And that is communication, common union. So we have to establish that common union.
That is good.
With those we're
I
communicating
might have to steal
with.
that one.
That's deep.
It's yours.
Well, tell us about these 3 categories and the 7 life languages, if you can explain each one of them and relate them to your own life.
So you guys
Okay.
thought of this. This
yes,
is how. Okay.
yes. It was the Lord, and I tell you, this is better than we are. It's smarter than we are. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just, Fred's background was psychology. We just knew we were trying to communicate.
By that, I have an undergraduate degree in graduate work in psychology. I wasn't ever a true psychologist or psychiatrist.
Yeah, but we did own psychiatric hospitals at one point. We had 3
Wow.
You guys have done
Wow.
so much.
But anyway,
Wow.
trying to understand this, we realized that we were onto something that was just amazing. And later, as God let us come in through, He let us come in through the back door of doing this.
Okay.
So we had the 3 categories, and then we had in one category the kinetic. We saw, okay, in the kinetic category, there's 2 different ways there people are communicating. In the cognitive, we saw they're not all the same. In the emotive, we saw there's differences. So we started doing focus groups, and we had 2 life languages under each category. And we thought, this is it.
And
This
we-
is balance. This is good.
And we would go to these psychologists and psychiatrists and other staff members and try it out on them and discuss it with them. And then we worked up some trial little exams or tests.
When we had our psychiatric
Profiles.
hospitals. And then one morning, we were having our prayer time with one of our spirit-filled psychiatrists, and we were studying Romans 12. And we just stopped and said, God has just told us that we have spent all these years studying the motivational gifts of Romans 12, the giftings of the Father. And we did not understand that there's not 6, there's 7. That's why it works. See, if we'd understood that at the beginning, we would have said, oh, there's too many people who know more about this than we do. We're not theologians. So we wouldn't have tried to do what we were doing. But he let us take our time through the years of developing each life language and each one's communication style and each one's needs and filter and passion and all of that. And that's why it works. It lines up with the Word of God.
Wow, I love that.
And see, we were hesitant to talk about it much, particularly when we were in the psychiatric business, because most all those men and women had either MDs or PhDs, and at a minimum a master's degree. And we felt like that if we started trying to tell them about it, they'd just think we were ridiculous. So we pretty well worked everything out, the categories and kind of the languages. Then we started trying it out on them. And here's what's interesting. When we got it that far along and started trying it out on them, they were something that we thought would never happen, because we knew most of them real well. And they all are kind of impressed with themselves. And they were impressed with the life languages more than they were themselves. And that was a real surprise.
And so what we understood after that was that there are many different testing instruments out there that we have used and psychiatric hospitals have used. Many churches use DISC or they use Myers-Briggs. And all of the different testing instruments that are out there mostly come from the secular mindset from Hippocrates. And then they adapt it to Christianity, whereas ours comes from the Word of God, and it can then be adapted to the secular world, which we do in city governments or state governments or institutions or businesses and things like that. And the interesting thing is it works whether it's secular or Christian because God's in charge of it.
Yeah. Yes, I know so many ministries use your profile for their employees and for their leaders to help them to be able to communicate better with one another, and it brings such a unity, I'm told. Can you tell us with the 3 different categories, the kinetic, the cognitive, and the emotive, can you tell us, break down the profiles?
Well, the first thing I had noticed, one of the things I had noticed when I was in the Marine Corps, now I had an undergraduate degree in psychology with some graduate work. One of the things I noticed in the Marine Corps, there were certain persons that if you gave them an order, they just went right at it. And I mean, it didn't matter if it was going to cost them their life or somebody else's life or several lives, they charged ahead. Then I noticed there were those who wanted to think it through, and you could almost see them lean back and say, I'm going to think about this. Yeah. And they might go to somebody and say, what do you think of this? And I listen for words like, what do you want to think about this? Or what do you think about this? And then I noticed there were a few people who just really got emotional, excited, either negative or positive. And so between watching for the emotive people, the cognitive people, and the kinetic people, I began to create in my mind those who served with me or served under me in the Marine Corps, whether they were cognitive, emotive, or kinetic. And if they were kinetic, I knew they made good point leaders, or they were good to go out on a point. If they were cognitive, I know it was good to let them participate in making the plans or planning things. Yeah. And if they were emotive, they were really good to bounce ideas off of, because you could see in their face what their reaction was going to be.
So the 3 categories, the kinetic, which is the action language, the 2 language, which is the action category, the 2 languages under that are movers and doers. Now, movers like to make things happen. Doers like to keep the wheels of progress moving and make sure it gets finished. Doers are great at starting things, and they're visionary, they're bold, they're courageous, they're direct, and they would be, and you can see Jesus in every one of these. Movers are standard bearers. And we have a first language mover right here.
Trying to get your microphone.
Okay, movers are standard bearers. And if you want to think in the terms of
she was setting a standard for you on the microphone.
I needed
the mover.
that standard. And if we think of this in the form of an animal or a symbol from nature, A mover would be a wild Mustang. They're not easily trainable. They're very independent, and they're always going for the outer limits. And they, but once they do get tamed a little bit, they make fabulous cutting horses, and but they have to respect their leader. So that's the mover. Then the doer, which is the other action language, the symbol from nature there is a beaver. They are very persistent. They will stick with it till it's done. They like to finish what they start. You can depend on them. They're trustworthy. They don't like a lot of changes, but when you see those two coming together, what a great team they make.
Yeah.
Well, you also watch beavers work in groups and build a thing as a team, whereas movers usually don't work that well as a team. They can work independently and help implement something, but they're not going to be like a beaver building a dam.
Yeah, they might run together, but
yeah. And of course, the emotive languages are something else.
The ones that feel first.
And I was married to one, and is an influencer. And her first thing is she always wants to feel good herself, and she wants you to feel good and everybody else feel good. And if you're not helping her to feel good, she's not with you.
So influencers are optimistic, they're outgoing, they're enthusiastic, they're persuasive. They're very relational. So if you're around an influencer, they want everybody to be included, and they're the ones that will say, boy, that was a great speech. Gee, you look good today. Isn't this a fabulous meeting? Because they're very positive in their approach to life. Now, an interesting thing, back to mover just a moment. Movers are strong, dynamic, bold, courageous. But if you overlook the fact that movers have a sensitivity, you miss something important. The sensitivity of the mover is they can see where sin is taking you and they'll weep. They can see where the problems of life have hurt you, and it causes them to tear up.
Now
They've got that sensitivity. By the same token, if you overlook the influencer and just see them as all a Pollyanna, you miss something because they feel and then think. They think real fast. So they have solutions. They have 1, 2, 3 steps, and usually their thinking and their ideas are right on.
Now, movers will be wounded perhaps if you're sinning or doing things that are wrong, but they also are liable to attack you.
Yeah, they'll
verbally
tell you.
or even physically. They do not tolerate foolishness or sinfulness if they know righteousness.
But that's when they're just a little bit toxic. Healthy movers don't attack anybody.
So there's healthy and unhealthy
And see,
to every language.
she says that. I've never known too many movers that stayed healthy all the time. Whenever you're going wrong, they're going to straighten you out.
They do. And one of the things, all of the life languages have distress levels, which we'll get into. But the distress flares for a mover is attack, demand, attack. It's like, are you going to get this done? Did you get it done? Why haven't you gotten it done? And then if you get it done, they'll apologize. Oh, I'm sorry. I thank you for getting it done. But if you haven't, then they attack again.
This is awesome. I'm loving every bit of this.
So then the other emotive language is the responder. Responder is the most frequently spoken language of all. And we believe it's because Jesus knew there were going to be lots of hurting people in the world.
30%.
Yeah, 30% at least are the responders. And they are the ones that care about where you are emotionally and spiritually. They're the ones that can be in a group and they can sense that something's wrong with you. And they'll go home and say, I was really worried about James tonight. I really saw something was wrong. And they'll be right, because they pick up on that. They have that sensitivity, that compassion, that passion. Here's the interesting thing. It's also the _1 language of contact sports. Particularly,
really?
Yes. So it's not a wimpy language.
Yeah.
Particularly men and women who are, let's say, men who are quarterbacks and contact sports. What does it take to run down a football field trying to outrun everybody? It takes passion, and they are the most passionate.
Wow.
So the symbols from nature for the influencer is the dolphin. They splash and they like to live in groups and they have fun and they're smart. They train them the Navy uses them for sending messages and stuff. And the symbol from nature for the responder is Lassie. Lassie will rescue you if you're hurting, and Lassie will put her head on your lap, but
she'll protect you.
She'll protect you. So responders are protective and sensitive.
Wow.
And then the other is
The cognitive.
The cognitive, then there's 3 of those.
And the first of those doesn't matter which one you take first, but is, what is it?
Shaper.
Is the shaper.
That's me. Yeah.
It's both of you.
Yeah, she's a high
Yes,
shaper also.
Both of you,
And,
yes.
and shapers like to plan. They like to tie things down,
Organize.
organize. They like to have people appointed to different positions.
Yeah.
And they either want to be leading themselves or they want somebody who is leading that they can count on. But they
Yeah.
want a leader. And if there isn't a leader, they'll assume that role themselves. And the other one that helped us discover all 7 life languages is contemplator. And that's the language of our son. And I had so many problems communicating with our son that's what really got us started. And I was out of state and out of town one time, and I was just thinking about the difficulty I had with Michael. And I would think about when we traveled, I would give assignments. Michael, when we stop, you get out and gas the car. Anna, you go in and give them the credit card and get us this and this and this and whatever else you see we want. So I got to think, why is Michael just seems to think in circles and thinks and
brilliant.
thinks. And, and we knew right away we had him tested, and he had a genius IQ. But
Wow.
and then he was a member of Mensa, and he had a high IQ in Mensa. But yet, he was so slow to getting around to doing what needed to be done because he was always thinking in circles, it seemed to me.
Wow.
So the
Let
symbol
her-
the symbol from nature then for just finish this. The symbol from nature for the shaper is the lion. Now you look at how the lion, it's all organized. The young lions roar and the big lions, whatever. But it's a very organized hierarchy.
Yeah. Okay, so and then there's a producer.
Yes.
Okay.
And so back to the contemplator.
One
there's-
second, what were you going to say?
Oh, just so they can hear her
Oh,
microphone.
I keep pushing it down. I know. Thank you for doing that. The symbol from nature for the contemplator is the owl, the wise owl, so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
would be the contemplator. The last is the producer, and that is the least frequently spoken language as a first language.
Okay.
And this is your mother's first language.
My mom's.
Yes,
Oh.
yes. And the producers like to manage things. They're very resourceful. They're good at stretching money and stretching resources and reusing resources and finding bargains. But what they want is quality. They don't buy junk. They don't look for
Yeah, yeah,
anything
yeah.
that's not a good quality. The other thing is they're very hospitable. You go to their house and everything
Yeah.
you feel like they knew you were coming and they didn't,
Yeah.
but they're
They
prepared.
may not
They
have known you were
are.
coming.
Yeah.
They are.
But they make you feel
They
like
make you feel like it, yes.
Yeah.
Very prepared.
I remember when growing up with my mom as a producer, she would come home and she would look in each one of our rooms to see if we were managing our time wisely. So she'd go to my brothers, and then she would go to my sisters and my dad's, and she would come to my room and it was closed and the door was locked because I didn't want to be managed. I wanted to be able to do things on my own.
You're that independent mover.
But Elizabeth, I wanted to ask you. I want to ask Anna and Fred the filter languages because I think that's important for the audience to know for communication
Yes,
styles.
each language has a filter, and a filter is much like you're wearing glasses. And
Now,
you,
before we go there fully, if you think back in your lives or those who are listening, they may see where their filter and where their life language was being used when they were back as children, even in their home. For instance, I'm a mover. I moved out of our house against my mother's desire, and my dad was like, "Oh, okay," and slept in another place where we had a little shed, and I fixed it up and made it mine.
he was what, 12?
I was 12,
Wow.
and and it really bothered my mother.
He wanted his own space.
Yes.
So, you can look back through your life and see where you exercise these different languages. Now, the mover filter is, what's your motive?
In other words, a mover is like, what's your agenda? What's your motive? It's like they don't really, they want it on the table. They don't want a hidden agenda. They don't want a hidden motive. It's like, just tell me what it is and we'll work with that. But don't try to act like for instance, you don't go to a mover and say, what are you doing Saturday? And because a mover
Why do
will
you
say,
wanna-
what do you
why do you
want
want to know?
But if you go to a mover and say, I'm moving Saturday, could you help me? The mover might say, sure. See, it's not they don't want to help, they just don't want a hidden agenda.
Or they may say this, I'm busy that Saturday, but Joe and Mary and Harry are probably not going to be busy.
Yeah.
So if you want me to, I'll ask them to help you.
We can give other people assignments.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
I know that one too well.
So that's the filter of the mover. So they're going to be looking at that with a communication. The doer is, are you doing your share? So their glasses, it's like, are you doing your share? Because it's not unusual if there's only one doer in a group for the doer to think, I am the only one around here that ever does anything. And what they're looking at are practical things, like I'm the only one that puts the dishes up, or that empties the trash, or that finishes the letters that need to go out.
Yeah.
So they want to make sure everybody's doing their share, and then they don't get stressed.
And they're
Okay.
talking about really the practical things.
Practical
Yeah.
things, yes. So then you go to the emotive languages, and you've got the influencer, and their filter is, are we communicating? Are we connecting?
And I mind looking good.
Yes, but it's, are we connected? We were at this gathering one time, and there was this man, long before you knew the languages, there was a man from Japan, and I kept trying to talk to him, and I'm chasing him around the room, and he's going backwards as I'm chasing him, trying to communicate with him. And Fred finally said, Anna, why are you chasing that man? I said, what man? What are you talking about? I just was trying to get in his space, and he had a big space and didn't want anybody in it. So, but that's one of the things that influencers want to do. We want to connect. Okay, then responders, their filter is very different, and it's like, do you really care about me and about those people I care about?
Oh,
Their
And
feelings.
Their feelings. In other words, it's like, you let a responder know that you care, and you've got a friend for life.
Oh, that's
Or you've got an
awesome.
employee
There's
for
Lassie,
life.
right? You said-
Yes, yes. If they know you care about them, their loyalty is there forever. And let them know you care about them, and then they'll lay down their lives to please you, you know, to do the work that needs to be done, or the service that's needed.
And so these filter questions, what exactly do they do? It's in a conversation, because your goal, your purpose is to be able to better communicate. So the filter questions are,
You need to answer that filter early in your communication with them.
That's it. That's it.
That's
See, like, for
so
instance,
good.
I'm a mover, and if either one of you came up to me, and I didn't know you, let's say of you two, or I did know you but slightly, and you start talking to me, it's sad to say this, but my question in the back of my mind is, why are you talking to me?
Like, what are
What
you?
is it you want?
so we answer that at the beginning of the
Yes,
conversation, and
yes.
then we'll have your attention. If we
Yes,
don't,
that's
we won't
right.
have your attention.
That is right.
And if you were to just walk up and say, Fred, I haven't seen you in so long, tell me what's been going on with you. That's enough that I can go comfortably into a conversation.
That's awesome. I love that.
And for you?
Yes, the same thing. It's like, it's so good to be with you again. We haven't connected in ages. Tell me what's been going on.
Well, it is slightly different, though, with an influencer. They're wanting to connect, but she's wanting to hear
About you.
about you.
But if you come up to me and you say, I'd like to hear about you, then you're connecting with me. So it's that, it's that.
Personalized.
It's a personalized connection.
well, for the shaper, what's the filter for the shaper?
Okay, we get to the shaper. And
'Cause
the
we're both
shape-
shapers.
Yes. The shaper is, do you have a plan for your life?
For whatever you're
For
talking about.
whatever you're talking about.
Or do
It's
you have
like,
a plan for tonight?
do you have a plan for today? And it's like shapers get so frustrated at people who don't have a plan. And we have this friend who's a high shaper, and she said, I have all of these friends that they're just like a goose. They wake up new every day and have no idea what they're going to do with their day. And she said, they don't have plans, and they'll call me and say, what should I do today? So I tell them.
I'm always
She's a high shaper for
Yes,
real.
that's for real.
I'm always thinking the night before, okay, for tomorrow, so I don't waste
I
any
plan
time.
the whole
What is my
day.
as I'm laying
Yeah.
in bed
I
for
do
tomorrow
the exact same
every
thing.
hour?
I didn't know you did that
Perfect,
too.
yes.
That's a shaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I go, how can people go through a day without just knowing what's done?
Yeah.
See,
Yes.
here's the difference, too. Influencers thinking, well, who am I going to see tomorrow?
Oh wow.
Yeah, what will I do for entertainment and
Yeah.
pleasure tomorrow? A mover's thinking,
Wow.
what needs to be straightened out? Who needs to be straightened out?
What can I fix?
What can I fix?
Yes.
That's right. What can I change? Because movers love to bring change. They love to
Wow.
improve and bring change.
And a contemplator, which is a cognitive language,
Yeah.
they'll lay in bed and just think and think and think, but it's theoretical largely. They are philosophers to some degree.
But their filter is, am I really interested in this? And now you could be talking to a contemplator, and
My dad.
Okay, and you're not talking about anything he's interested in, and you can watch his eyes glaze over, and he may stay in the room with you, but you've lost him. He's back there somewhere.
Or my dad
That's
would
so
leave my
awesome.
mom at the dinner table with the guests and go back and start studying.
Yes,
And she would get so upset with him because he
right.
would just
Wow.
disappear, and she'd look and he's gone.
Yeah, because nothing that was going on was of interest to him, and what he needed to do was. So, but
Or what
so-
he wanted to do.
So what we tell people to do is to make a bridge,
Okay.
to bridge that, and realize, the more awareness we have, and one of the things you want to know is, what do people hope to gain from taking the KLP?
Yeah.
You learn about yourself. You
Yeah.
have self-awareness, then you can develop other awareness.
What I love about what you guys do too, it's fun. It's
Yeah,
actually
it
really
is fun.
fun to learn like who you are and how to
Yes.
communicate. Well, let's kind of move on a little bit.
Let's go through all 7
Since
languages.
since the office of the prophet, let's go through all these prophets that are watching globally that
Yes.
are different nations, different cultures. What are the different the 7 profiles? Is that
Okay,
the correct?
yes.
Through the eyes of the prophet.
That is such an exciting question. And we were talking about that on the way out here. As a matter of fact, we were at the Hammonds a few years ago, and
Yeah.
we did some workshops on the life languages. And we said, everyone in this room, no matter what language you speak, you will prophesy in the communication style that God has given you,
Wow.
either in your first or second communication style. A responder's communication style is, as they're giving a prophecy, it would be like, God sees your pain. God
They're
sees-
feeling it.
God sees what you're going through, and He wants you to know that you're not alone. I mean,
Yeah.
it would be that.
Wow.
An influencer would be, God has seen what you're going through, and He wants you to know that the future is great. Wonderful things are in store for you. The prophets.
And that and as an influencer, and you are impacting people. You're helping
yes.
people.
You're making a difference in this world.
Wow.
And the movers, it would be like things are happening and God is trying to get your attention because you may need to change some of your direction here, or maybe.
Or change somebody else.
Yes. And don't be afraid to speak out and be bold, and just
Wow.
release them.
What are the
Release
other
them.
ones too? for
Okay,
the
and,
prophet?
and then the doer, it would be something that's very, very practical. You look around and God is calling you to meet the needs of people that are around you and the physical needs.
We had a lady at our house one night, and she went out and got her husband from living room where everybody was visiting and took him in the kitchen. And she said to him, in my presence, honey, I told you on the way over here, the Lord wanted us to help in the background in the kitchen. And so I said, have you taken our profile? And she said, yes, I'm a doer. And I said, and what's your husband? And she said, he's a responder.
Oh man, that's a wrong thing to say to a responder.
Well, you see, here's the thing. Responders want to be part of things and want to be helpful, and they want to be encouraging.
Yeah.
So he immediately got in the kitchen and began to do his share. And she immediately got in the kitchen and did her share. And then in a little bit, somebody came in and said, you all need some more help in here. And so I said, what's your first language, if you know? And they said, mover. So they started bossing people around.
But the interesting thing about the husband who was the responder, someone did come into the kitchen a little earlier than that, and she looked up, and he's over in the corner talking to this couple because they've got some situations
That's a marital
He's
problem.
helping.
Yes,
That's
and so that
yeah.
was
Oh, wow.
So now, if it's a shaper and a shaper is getting ready to prophesy, God is going to speak through that shaper in ways of planning. Let's talk. God will speak future into that. The shaper is very future focused, and when God is prophesying the future, the shaper is the perfect one to be speaking through that person.
And
Okay.
in
Wow.
our case, we have quite a few people refer to us. Responders tend to refer a lot of people who are hurting,
Okay.
and then they tend to come only 1 or 2 times if they've been referred. Shapers tend to refer people who are hurting, but they refer them, they say, now, don't go over there and expect everything to get straightened out in 1 or 2 visits. you need to probably see Fred and Anna, or see Fred at least 5 to 7 times.
Schedule
love
this
that.
in so that you've got this schedule.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
don't just go by how you're feeling. Okay, so if a contemplator is going to prophesy, if the Lord's going to speak through a contemplator, there is a philosophical flair to it. It will have something that it maybe quotes scripture, maybe quotes the Old Testament, maybe then brings in the New Testament, and then in the process brings that around to what that's going to mean to them. But it's a contemplative thing, whereas the movers, it's like Kenneth Copeland's doing it this way. The contemplator is
And
going
then when she says Kenneth Copeland, they're not saying Kenneth Copeland's doing it this way.
No.
They're saying to you, do it this way.
a mover, like we've never profiled Kenneth Copeland, but he's definitely a high mover. So you can see,
At least in his first or second language, we think.
Yeah.
So you can just see how the different languages. Copeland is not going to be philosophical in prophetic words. Like movers are not going to be philosophical, but a contemplator is going to be philosophical, but yet they will give the word that is the direction from the Lord that will confirm something in that person's life. And God knows when they're the ones that need to be used, because they will reach people that none of the other life languages will.
Wow.
See, and then when there's a prophecy from a producer, it's going to be really interesting, because producers love to manage. They're hospitable. They're gracious. So there's a graciousness about it. There is a generosity about it, a generosity of spirit, a generosity of finances, and then there's resourcefulness. And you can hear that come through when the producer gives a prophetic word.
And they seem to be hesitant in giving prophetic words. And they're the lowest percentage of languages. In other words, there are fewer producers that we've profiled than of any other language. So it's kind of like they look at you and they're like, you need some help, but how do I do this in a way that will really help you?
Yeah.
Whereas like a mover's,
You know what the mover's thinking.
Yes.
Yes.
And with you see it in their face. With a producer, we say that's the least frequently spoken language as a first language. We believe it's because of all of the life languages, producers seem to be the most well-balanced. They can kind of lean over to the emotive and show relational graciousness, or they can kind of lean over to the kinetic, and they can get some action oriented, but they are cognitive, and they're just very well balanced. And if there were a lot of them, they'd make the rest of us feel really bad. So God just has a few of them out there.
The producers are balancers. I
Yes,
love that.
they
So
Speaking of Elijah and Elisha, with the generations coming together, this is what the Elisha company that Elizabeth is spurring on here. When they come together, the Elishas and the Elijah generations, what tips would you give them for working together?
okay, who here is with the Elijah group? Who's pushing the Elijah group?
we'll
Leading
say
there?
sitting here, well, you guys would be considered Elijah, and we would be
Absolutely.
Elisha.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Okay,
So
Fred,
here's what I would say. You tell us. Because you've been thinking about it some. And I think it's interesting. See, we can tell you, but we need to be learning too from people who are getting visions to be Elijah, Elisha,
Yeah.
or John, or whoever.
here's one of the things I would say about Elijah. Don't give Fred an opportunity to call down fire from heaven.
No
and
movers.
Throw
no
all
movers.
the priests over the cliffs. We don't want to do that. Didn't Elijah do that?
Yes.
So you're saying Elijah was a high mover.
Yes. And I think Elisha was a high mover. I don't think it was as high as Elijah.
Okay.
But he was. They were both men of action.
Okay, can you share like maybe a story on each of those?
Well, I would say I just did Elijah.
Well, see, I think it's
Oh, yeah,
neat
yeah.
if you, knowing
Yes,
what you
yes.
know,
Tell us what
share
you
a
know
story.
now, yes.
Because, see, no one person in the body of Christ has all of Christ's answers or all of the biblical answers, even
Yeah.
if they may think they do.
So, knowing what we've told you, what would you say Elisha's first language would be?
And can you give an example?
Missy, you're brilliant at this, so I'm still learning.
No, I would say he was also a mover as well.
Okay.
I think we discussed this earlier, but because of, I mean, what the youth, the young people when he had a bald head was making fun of them, and he gets bears to eat him up.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's like, don't mess with me.
He was a little sensitive.
Yeah.
Movers can be sensitive, as you said.
You know what's
yes.
amazing to me, and this is still perplexed because we have through the years, tons of conversations, like just discussing how people flow and do life together. But one of the things that gets me is the personality that's can come off a little bit like intense and like a mover, but they're the most sensitive, and like that really, like, I'm trying to fully understand how they sometimes don't come off sensitive when they're saying something, but they need people to be sensitive to them when they're receiving. Do you
Can
understand?
you explain that?
Well, as we talked about earlier, all of the life languages can have weaknesses.
Yeah.
And they can even be to the point that they're toxic in some of their behavior.
Yeah.
And we don't like to admit that any of us can be, but we certainly can be, and that's when we get in our distress levels.
And the other thing is, like responders are very sensitive for themselves and for other people. If they're sensitive for themselves, and if you're saying something to them that they think is critical of them, are they going to be sensitive about that? Yes. If you're saying something to a friend of theirs and you're not being sensitive, you're talking about their friend's bald hair. You know, they say, you know, by the time you're 39, you're going to be bald. A healthy responder right there, or it's not their friend, is going to be upset about it. So we tend to be sensitive about things that are other-oriented, and we tend to be sensitive about things that are other-oriented based on our filter, but we're sensitive about ourselves based on our filter too. And see, I'm a mover. I get real sensitive if somebody is being negative.
Wow, that's really good. The profile, let's get back to the question if we can.
Okay.
The profile with Elijah and Elisha, I know we were discussing this early on and with different stories in the Bible, but can you tell me from your professional opinion, first profile Elijah first and then Elisha, or if you think it's maybe similar?
I think it is very similar. I think Elijah was a stronger mover. And when you take the profile, each language is given an intensity. Like it can be a 90, it can be an 80, it can be a 70. So I would say Elijah's first language of mover was very high.
Okay.
So it's a high intensity mover. I think Elisha was a high mover, but you know, you see that he's also got maybe some of the doer qualities in there, in that he was very persistent. He continued to follow Elijah. He was going to keep him inside. He was going to get that mantle. So he was showing some of the dedicated, observant, persistent things about the doer. And then also you see Elisha being concerned about housing for people, and so you can see more of his profile, like maybe a mover, doer, possibly responder in there.
Wow.
So you see a little bit more of that as you study it.
What about the depression that Elijah went into?
That more than likely was the responder. Responders are the most sensitive, therefore they're the most likely to be depressed. And when we were in the psychiatric hospital business and we were starting to develop the profile, we seemed to find more responders being depressed.
So you would say then Elijah was a mover responder. And see, we can access whichever language. Like sometimes we will have our strengths in our first language. Sometimes we go into distress in our second language. And that's important to understand too. Or even someone can, like, let's say Elijah was a first language responder, second language mover. Responder tends to be transparent. It's like you can see through the responder language, and it lets the second language come through. And sometimes people will say, I didn't know you were a responder. I thought you were a shaper. And what will happen is, the shaper is the second language, but it lets the shaper language shine through. So that could have been it too. And that's why we tell people it's important to understand all the languages. Don't guess at what you are,
Yeah.
because you may see your second language as the stronger one, but there really may be the first. Like, for instance, we have a niece who is a responder doer. All right, she is very doer oriented. She was taking the wax off of furniture, and she was sanding the hardwood floors and painting, and then very into exercise and very into teaching, and just high doer all the way around. When she took the profile, her first language was responder. And we said, well, that means that you are sensitive and warm and nurturing and affectionate and passionate and compassionate, and that you like affection. And her family said, is that you? And she said, yes. And they said, none of us have ever seen that, and we've never treated you that way.
But her second language was high doer.
Yeah. Doer was what they saw. But when she took the profile,
Wow.
you saw the other. It just allowed that one to shine through.
But it set her
she
free,
was,
right?
Oh, yes. She was hurting all those years
Wow.
because she needed hugs and pats and, all of those sensitive things that she wasn't getting.
Responder is a language most likely to let a second language shine through. But if you don't know that and don't allow that second language to shine through, it may not. Now, one of the things, just to cover real quickly, if you look at the languages in depth or study them, the mover, their chronic pattern, which means that's not good,
When they're unhealthy, their chronic pattern of unhealthiness.
is one way. Their way or the highway. The doer, which is the other kinetic language, is similar, but theirs isn't one way in the same way. But it's stubborn. They're just going to do it how they want to do it, and but they're not going to tell you you got to do it that way. Whereas movers going to tell you you should be doing it their way. Doers are just going to do it their way and not tell you anything.
Wow.
And as you go through each of the languages, the influencers, their chronic pattern when it's as unhealthy is they manipulate.
And you can see this in politicians, movie stars, all kinds of different people, that they manipulate everybody in their world.
I
to
think
try
Bill
to get what
Clinton
they want.
is a classical
What?
influencer. Bill Clinton.
I love that.
Classical
influencer, yes. But
influencer.
you know what? So was Ronald Reagan. Two different men, one with character, one without, and that's all I'm going to say about that.
So character can.
Character
And,
counts.
and responders, they're self-absorbed when they're negative.
yeah. When
They're just in their emotions.
I know a couple of
it's
those.
all
No, I'm
about
just kidding.
me. Yes. It's all
Wow.
about me. Yeah.
And then shapers just calloused.
Oh, that's totally me. Like that's before I got healed.
Yes,
Because
yeah.
I go like deer in headlights when I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I am panicking on the inside. And so I go callous. But thank you, Jesus, I'm healed in that area.
Amen. And see, we can be healed of all of these.
Yeah.
And
So,
the producers controlling.
yeah.
They're gonna. And what's the best way to control things? Control resources.
Wow.
Control resources.
So a lot of wealthy people sometimes
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
they use that sometimes, like where pastors may have trouble in church. The weakness of that is they might try to use to control their money to
Absolutely.
control.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And they give with strings attached. I'll give you a new car, but you have to come to dinner every Sunday. Something
To
like
their
that.
children.
To their children or something.
You guys are amazing. I'm learning so much here. Okay, let's kind of move a little bit on.
Let me mention one other language.
Sure, go ahead.
Contemplator.
Okay.
They're unilateral.
That's their chronic, unilateral. It's like,
It's true.
yeah. Can you see that?
Yes.
We're all like ding, ding, ding.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
That's 7 languages.
Okay. So
I gave the chronic
Chronic
pattern for each of
pattern.
the 7 languages.
those are good to know as much as the
It
good
is.
part of it is
It's
good
like
to know.
it's important to know what your 7th language is as well as your first or second or third, because your last language, that shows you the people you're going to have more difficulty communicating with. But once you know that, you can
Choose to
deal with it.
communicate in that language if you learn it.
Yeah.
Because we have all 7 languages.
We've
Yes.
got all 7. Jesus had all 7. Jesus lives big in us, so we've got all 7. But we can't live in our 6th and 7th language all the time, but we can go there when we need to.
But you can't go there if you don't know it and haven't studied. It's like you can't go into being like Jesus if you don't spend time in the Word or in prayer.
And know him. Yeah.
You got to know Him.
Okay, so this might be a loaded gun asking this question. So say like generations of prophets, like we're saying, all the different generation X, Y, Z, baby boomers.
Yes.
And I know every generation has their strengths and weaknesses, just like personalities. So what concerning prophets, it seems like I know any covenant relationship is attacked by the enemy, real covenant relationships. But when it concerning prophets, what are some things do you guys feel? Because you have studied the lives of prophets.
Yes.
You feel that the enemy maybe attacks in and how they can work better together generationally as prophets.
Go ahead.
I think one of the first things to realize is any one of the 7 languages can be prophetic.
Okay.
So if you stop and say mover, that's the language of the prophet.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you're stuck with one language
Yeah.
and one group of people being prophets. Any language, any group of people can become
Yeah, absolutely.
gifted to be speaking in a prophetic way. So that's the first thing, is to learn to be flexible.
So then what the enemy tries to do is it's all about relationships.
No,
So
that's not what the enemy tries.
what the enemy
Yeah.
tries to do is come in and destroy the relationships, get prophets who are not compatible, or think that the other person is not hearing from God, or whatever the lie that the enemy says to try to destroy the relationships, that's what he's going to do. And we can have generations of prophets that come from all 7 different languages.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, if a child grows up in a family that prophesies, the first thing that child has going for him or her is that they're comfortable with it. It's not foreign. It's something that they know that God speaks through people, and so they're more open to it. It's a little bit more difficult for those that were raised in no Christian family, or in like a denominational family where there weren't prophets, because they have to learn to get comfortable, and that's why the school of prophets and things like that are so important, because they have to learn that it is real, that God does speak, that even me, God could speak through. They have to get past that. But I think the enemy is always trying to attack. You're not good enough. You're not called. What you're saying is not true. You're going to mess somebody up. And so they have to be careful of the self-talk and the devil talk, and not receive it. Realize that's not from God, and I'm not going to receive it. And then encourage each other. Learn to communicate. Learn to communicate in those relationships.
Wow.
And it's interesting, but you said something earlier, and I've forgotten exactly how you said it, but we say something and teach people to say something very similar, and that is, when people are speaking to you in a way that's not in harmony with the way you feel or believe or think, if you just simply say, that's interesting, you don't disagree with them, but it's interesting, and it also implies that you'll think about it.
Yeah.
And I think we need to think more about what people say to us.
Yeah. And value
Yeah.
them.
And see-
Value. Yes, everybody needs to be valued.
And see, there's the 7 life languages, and the language that's most prophetic-like is mover. But any one of the 7 languages can have the gift of prophecy for a specific time and purpose. Yeah. And if you receive a specific message of prophecy, and you're a responder, you'll give it differently than if you were a mover. If you receive a prophecy for a group and you're a doer, you'll receive it and say it and deliver it differently than one of the other languages. So it's what God's really trying to say is, there's lots of flexibility in the body of Christ.
That's really good. Yeah. Well, let's kind of go on. We'll switch over just down. Let's talk about kind of my languages. We're going to go through both our languages. And as a leader, and there's so much truth going on here. So I want you guys to share, like, maybe when I go through this with you, like my strengths, and I'm a person, I love working on my weaknesses because it makes me a better leader, and I'm able to love better,
Absolutely.
So when I took it, and I know we shared this here, that I'm a high shaper. 80, is that a percentage? 83.
That's your intensity. Yes,
okay.
That's a percentage.
I'm pretty intense, and
You're actually very Actually, you're very intense at 83.
Yeah. And so then my producer is 58, influence 57, and responder. My influencer and responder are both 57. So as a leader, what are like my strengths, and then what potentially could be my weaknesses?
Okay, as a high shaper, and you're a high shaper, and then you sort of fall off the cliff to get to your next three. You know?
I know,
So
really.
that means you're going to stay in your shaper most of the time.
Yes.
That means you're a natural born leader.
But your next language, your second one, you're in the above 50.
Right.
The next two languages, you're above 50. Anything
The next
near
three.
or above 50 is pretty much a language that you can reach and speak in easily.
Yeah.
As a shaper, you're organized, you're focused, you're strategic,
Yeah.
and you are visionary.
Yeah.
And you see the steps of action necessary to reach your goal.
Yeah.
Now, movers are visionary. They don't necessarily see the steps of action necessary unless their next language is shaper. So you're doubly visionary.
Well, what movers see is the
Double
next
vision.
step of action. A mover sees the next step of action, but it's not in steps. It's like move now. What about moving now? Do you not understand?
So what you need, or your passion, the passion of a shaper, is to lead. So you naturally will be raised to a level of leadership, whether that in a person who's a high shaper, whether that is you have a neighborhood Bible study, or you're the president of PTA, or you teach a Sunday school class, or you're a CEO, or you're the pastor of a church. You rise at a level of leadership.
But you'll do it in an organized way.
Yes.
You'll have an organization that you want put in place, and you'll stick with them until they're either organized, or you'll just say, this is a waste of time.
And you know, interestingly, now like all languages lead, and we do a whole seminar on the leadership styles of each language because they lead differently.
Their filter
Everything,
leader. Yeah.
yes, everything
list
about
different.
them leads differently.
Yeah.
So, but yours as a shaper, both of you, high shaper, you both have that natural leadership gifting, so you will come to that place.
But here's what you do that makes it natural, is you do it with steps involved and with organization involved and a strategy involved and then with tactics. Whereas some of the others, it's just get with it. That would be mover.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So the weaknesses now of mine.
Oh, the weaknesses.
feel the drum roll.
Okay, here we go. Distress flares. This
Okay.
means you're going into distress.
Okay.
This doesn't mean that you're into your toxic levels. It just means you're in distress right now. So pay attention to it, or those around
So
you pay attention.
how would I go into distress? Like how do I even start
what
to
were you
enter that
thinking
way?
of?
Like the shaper.
Okay, you will go into distress. You will find yourself criticizing. Then you'll want to eliminate, and then you'll want to take over.
So, okay, but say like I'm healthy. What would cause me to start distressing?
Example.
All right, anything like not enough sleep,
Okay.
not enough time.
Inadequate food.
Yes, I mean anything that can cause your body to feel distressed, and then
Yeah.
you've committed to too many things, and then the people that you've delegated to, they're not following what they're
Okay,
supposed
that
to be
one
doing.
gets me. Oh,
Okay?
that's my weakness. We'll talk
Okay.
about later.
All right, and see again, shapers are natural born delegators. They,
Yeah.
doers don't delegate because they can do it themselves so well. By the time they tell somebody what to do and show them how to do it, they could have done it.
And their
But-
mind doesn't think that way.
But shapers, you think that way. So if the people you've delegated to are not doing it, distress starts coming
Okay,
in.
I'll go ahead and pull that because it was going to be later on in my question. But okay, so here is my weakness, and I'm trying to work on this because it will make me a better leader.
Yes.
But like for me, sometimes I go, I'll just do it. It's
Yeah.
easier for me just to say I'll do it myself, but that's not a leader.
That's
A
called-
leader knows how to delegate really well. But here's the thing. When I usually, because I think my responders kicks in a little bit when I'm delegating, because I'm like, are you okay? Are you feeling good about what I've delegated to you? And so I feel like I'm kind of tripping myself out in my brain sometimes. Maybe it's an insecurity in my leadership, maybe. Or my responder is just acting up or something. I don't know. But at the same time, too, if they don't do it, like I feel like I am like shutting down on the inside because it's like you want to be polite to them, but they don't realize how their lack of not being on time in their timeline is affecting my whole process.
Yes.
And
So-
so I'm like, that's the hard, I have to say that is the hardest thing for me. She knows.
Yes.
So it's the hardest thing for me. And so I try to communicate, and it's like they are like, they don't realize, like, I am freaking out on the inside, even though I'm not showing it, because, you know, I go callous a little.
Yeah.
But because I'm in distress, and you're messing my whole plan up
Absolutely.
to
I
can
get
feel
God's
it from
fit.
her.
Yes.
Yeah.
She radiates.
Yeah. So, and I'm like, but because I'm trying to hold it in and be Christ-like, but at the same time, too, I'm letting you know you're really... So obviously that's my really strong weakness.
And a strong weakness that goes with shaper like that is they're natural born leaders, so they keep leading conversationally, and they don't really allow the other persons to give input conversationally.
Okay.
So should they ask questions?
So they need to ask
questions. I'm writing that one down. Ask
Yes.
questions. I'm going to get a big sign in my room
And
that
listen.
says "Ask questions."
And listen.
And listen.
Oh yeah, and listen.
Not just here.
The Shaper's level 1 distresses, they under or over delegate.
I under delegate. I will say that, and that probably puts me a little bit in distress.
I'm sure it does.
And then
Because I literally work all the time because
Okay.
I need to make up for people that didn't
don't
fit
do
the
it.
timeline.
And then they become demanding and
don't think I'm-
self-driving.
I'm probably
not
so.
demanding.
I'm not demanding at
Are
all.
you
My
demanding
responder.
on yourself?
I am demanding.
See,
I
demanding
literally
is
work all
demanding.
the time.
Yeah, that's demanding. You maybe aren't demanding others,
Yeah.
but you're demanding more and more and,
see-
more from yourself.
And here's
Yeah.
what: if you're demanding of yourself and you're with others and they're near you, you're demanding of others.
That I actually start staying away from people when I
Okay.
feel that. Come on, I actually get by myself.
Then you
like I
beca-
shut down my
Then
extrovert
then
side.
you begin to seem to them as cold and indifferent.
Yes, that's so true.
Yes, yes. Yep.
Oh,
So-
y'all make me about to speak in tongues. Kurabasha.
Then
Help
if
me,
you-
Jesus.
If you drop to the next level, that's the first level.
Wow.
If you drop to the next level, you use people, you become sarcastic, critical,
I don't
and
use
calloused.
people. I may become callous a little bit, but it's to myself, and I actually pull away.
Well, see, here's the
You
thing.
know.
Until you really can see yourself, you don't know what you do.
Yeah.
That's not
oh,
right.
I've seen it today now more.
Yes, yes. That's,
So-
and that's
And
good.
the level 3, see, what I want you to understand is it's not just like one level and this is it.
Oh, so level 3, there's a level 3?
Yes.
Yeah, see, we've
They're
done
the-
level 1 and
there's-
level 2.
Well,
Okay.
There's the flares, and then there's level 1, level 2, and level 3. The flares are to give us an indication that we're going into
And they're just
distress.
they're
Okay.
short-lived.
Yeah.
You,
It's like
you
a
light
flare.
a
You
flare,
send
it
up a
goes up in the air, and it goes out.
okay.
Yeah.
So
You-
what's the third level on that one?
The third level on Shaper is they become suspicious, untrusting, they withdraw and isolate, and if they're not
Gosh,
careful,
I think a couple times in my life I've hit third. You
I
know what?
love your
The
transparency.
But the grace of God that helps you, I am
Yes.
so appreciative to the voice of God that says
Amen.
you need to get out of this place.
Yes.
You know.
She's very
wow.
healthy.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's
You
good.
know.
and then they become addicted. They can easily become addiction
Wow.
And it's interesting.
Addicted.
When shapers become
to
addicted.
stimulants and exercise.
Yeah, they can get addicted to exercise, especially running.
Okay.
And then they would get addicted to stimulants that would help them to work longer hours because they can be workaholics.
So I've been drinking a lot of coffee this week. I'm just kidding, but
Well, you don't
so
have to kid. You know, see, it's really
Yeah.
good if you can say things like that
no, I'm not
and
a
keep a smile.
Yeah.
And be telling the truth.
Yeah.
Because until you
So
reach
many
the
people
point you can
smile.
keep a smile and
Yes,
tell the
yes.
truth, you don't change.
Yeah, you know what's so good too, like, because Missy and I, maybe we get along really well in the sense we'll go in a room and we'll be like, oh, that person's this and this and this, and we like kind of because it helps us communicate. But we talk so much about the languages and our weaknesses. Like I think we give each other room. Like she'll tell me her weakness, I'll tell, and there's something about being able to talk about it that almost starts healing you
does.
to
It
some
does.
degree, right? And so.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, Fred and I do that, too, and we have to work at not get defensive about it because it'll be like, okay, you talk too much. I didn't. You talk too much. No, it was you who talked the most.
Oh my goodness.
So since we're doing that, let me show you where you guys are looking at. We want to advertise to those online. Okay, so these are
Charts.
which one were you looking
I
at
was
when you
looking
were? You were looking at this one on the success communication keys, and you can get this on your website, lifelanguages.com.
Yes, you can.
Okay, so this one is the filters.
It gives everything. It gives the filters, the need, the passion.
It's a summary.
It's a summary of each life language.
Wow.
We have an attorney friend who has that framed and in his office. And when
Wow.
he's talking to his clients, he looks at that. You know,
That's
which is
awesome.
just
Good idea.
excellent. Yes.
And this is all on there. And then also, this is the...
Distress levels.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, I might be going on your website myself.
You might wanna
But...
Look at the distress levels in one of the languages and just look at the distress levels in one of the languages
yeah.
and see and read it out, you know, just so that people understand what we mean by distress.
Wow, and it's so helpful. Like, okay, for mine, like you read these out. Like now I go, oh, well, that's negative. I really need to work on that to make that
But you didn't
healthier.
read it out.
But you had just done that.
Yeah, you just
But
did that.
here's the
So-
one these are the attributes of Christ and how each language flows
Wow.
in those. And those are the ones that are easy for each of those languages to flow in.
Okay, so for like mine, since we're talking about mine right now, decisiveness, discretion, excellence, endurance, patience, responsibility, tolerance. Okay, so those are awesome. I love those. And then, so that one you can get also. And then this one, we did the distress. And this one is,
This is the success wheel.
okay, so can you explain a little of this?
Yes, Fred, you want to tell them about that?
Well, the success wheel in life, in order to be successful, you got to touch several areas of your own life and other people's life. So, reach for it and hand it to me.
Oh, okay, there you go.
So, as you look at this, it has all 7 languages going around it. But we have at the top contemplator. And the reason we have that is because contemplators are the most intelligent, most inquisitive, and most philosophical of any language. So they're the ones who probably have something going on in their brain about whatever's going on around this world or in this world now.
And let's just look at this. Let's say this was a family meeting, or it was a staff meeting,
Yeah.
or you're preaching to a large group. This shows you how to touch on each life language as you are addressing that. But let's say it's a staff meeting, and you start first with the responder.
Okay.
So,
And the reason you start first, and we have that here, and Anna's quite polite in the way she's addressing it. I should have started first with the responder. The first thing you want to do with people continuously is show them you care.
so you have a staff meeting, you're leading it, and the responder's compassionate, creative, passionate. So you start by saying, does anybody here have anything we should pray about? Let's just start. Is anything bothering anyone or anything we'd like to address before we get started?
So, but as a high shaper, I naturally wouldn't think of
No.
feelings at all.
No, but
that's how to connect
start.
with them.
Then you go
Wow,
next to
that's
the
good.
influencer, and the influencer then it's win-win, inclusive, enthusiastic. Well, you know, we have just had a fabulous week here, and I just want to appreciate all the things that you all did to help make it so good.
And did you hear
Wow.
about Susie? She was in a triathlon, however you say it,
Triathlon.
and she came in first.
Yeah, so you announce the good, praise things. Then you go next to the shaper. Okay, they're organized, strategic, and focused. The purpose of this meeting today, and I'd like to explain this to you, is we want to accomplish these 4 things. And so you kind of talk
That
about
makes
that.
me so happy when someone says
Oh,
that. Let's go through
yes.
these 4 things.
Exactly. You know what to expect.
Yeah.
Okay, then you go next to the producer. And to do these 4 things, producers are financial, they're
Okay.
hospitable, they're resourceful. Then you say, Elizabeth, you're the producer in this group. You know, I would like for you to see that we can financially afford to do all these things and in which order you think we should. And since so-and-so, these are the second language producers, you all might get together and figure out what's the best way for us to use the resources we've
That's so
got.
good.
Or do we need to raise some money? Now,
That's
That's
think
really
really
about-
good.
You're asking them to be hospitable as they're talking about finances, which is oftentimes not. And then you'd say,
Wow.
and while you're there together, the 4 of you, think of a way that you can make this so that everybody seems to be involved and participate and is placing their resources available looking for their resources to be involved.
And you may not have anybody who's a first language producer, but in your group, you would address, let's say it's a third language producer, so you touch on these. Then you go next to the contemplator. They're intellectual, they're inquisitive, they're philosophical, they love research. So you say, Joe, we think this is the way to go, but would you mind doing some research on this? Check this on Google, or just go into some of your books and see what you can think about. Are we hitting this right on the nail? Or just we'd like to have your thinking, because would you ponder on this? Because I know you're going to see this from a different perspective. So would you come forth and tell us about that after you've had some time to think about it?
You know what's so amazing that I'm hearing you guys share today? I think sometimes leaders that don't last are leaders that always try to get everyone to become their language.
Exactly.
Instead of which I'm learning this, instead of learning everyone's language and then filtering everything to them.
Yes.
And so you produce a successful team, and you're successful because your team's successful.
See, I would prefer to have a team of all influencers. We would have so much fun.
Oh,
I
my
was
goodness.
thinking that about high shapers. Lord, give me a team of
Yes,
high
exactly.
shapers. We could change the
We
world.
could, but then we go to the
No
doer,
feelings.
and the doers are practical, they're diligent, they're dedicated, they
Wow.
finish what they start.
That's
And you
awesome.
see, the interesting thing about having doer, if the group knows that doer is going to come up next, the contemplators are thinking of deeper, more intellectual ways to make it practical. Because doer is a practical language.
So then the doer, they're going to bring this practical thing of like, I know that we need to redo the ceiling. And, I've been looking at the cobwebs up there. Could we do the cobwebs this week, and then we'll redo the ceiling when you all figure out that we've got enough money to do that? I mean, so it's kind of like you ask for their input, and you'll be amazed at what you get from their
And everybody
perspective.
needs each other. It seems like they all
Exactly.
connect.
And then you go to the mover, and the mover, innovative, forceful, standards. And the movers will say, ask them about the standards. So how would you address that?
Well, generally speaking, if you use this success wheel, mover is the last language you bring up. And you say, okay, we've looked at all this different things. Now, how are we going to make it happen and happen quickly and rather easily?
And make it right. Do it the right
And
way.
Oh, you're
done
saying
right.
as a mover, as you.
So now you say to the mover. Now,
Or to the movers.
Yeah.
to the movers.
But you're
say,
also saying to everybody in there, see if you can think like a mover.
Yeah. So it's now time to make it happen. Let's all get up. Let's get our assignments. Let's go for it. Let's make it happen. This is going to be great. And let's make sure this is done right, that is done honestly, and that we have high standards and
I
excellence.
love that. I
And
love
see,
that.
the mover is innovative.
Wow.
They're forceful, and they set standards.
Mm-hmm.
So you've ended up in the seventh language, which is saying, is there a better way to do it than we've thought of? Is there a forceful way we can just really make it happen? And what kind of standards can we maintain?
And it wouldn't be unusual for a mover to say, well, I think all of that's good, but I see a more creative way of doing this. If we would just do this and this, we could eliminate that and that. Because they love to bring change, and they've got that ability to see, you think the seats are better this way, but, how about if we do them in a semicircle or a full circle or whatever? They bring that creative, innovative. Movers are it's the number one language for entrepreneurs. So they have that flair that they bring in. So
Can I ask you something? I mean, we're going to shift on
Of
from
course
mine
you can
because
ask us.
And that's part of the charts.
because I do need to help. So so for me, the weakest that I feel like I need to just walk away, because I'd rather walk away quiet than stand there and say, because it's just my weakness. So it is people that say stuff and they don't do it, but also people that you always have to watch their feelings. We're at work. Why is there feelings involved? I don't get it. Why don't we just get the task done? What are some steps that or things you can give me, advice you would give me on becoming better? Because I don't know that I could ever change being a high shaper, because if that's who God made me, but what are advice that I could to better understand maybe the weakness of the responder in a leadership team?
I would say one of the first things is to study the value of the responder. See, it's easy for us to say, they're just wishy-washy, or they just let their feelings control them, and things like that. But see the value that God made them, because he knows we need responders who will really care about other people. So understand the value of the responder first. And then as you understand the value, healthy responders are delightful people to be around.
I love healthy responders.
Yes. It's the unhealthy ones that are difficult. So then you pray, God, is there a way that we as a team, or me as a leader, can help this person to heal, and help this person to grow, and help this person to not be so, dysfunctional. and if there isn't, then that may not be the right place for them.
Absolutely, especially on a leadership team, because then it pulls away. It makes me have to shift into try to understand them, and it takes away from my process of getting work done.
And it needs to be a one-on-one that you work to understand that person. But there's challenges. What are you laughing at?
God's working.
One of the things that I would say is, in your meetings, where you can, make sure you make a list of what's to be done and by who.
Okay.
And make sure each person has that same list and by who. So if the list is that we're going to meet in 2 weeks, and Fred, you're going to notify, and you name the 5 people. So Fred, do you have those 5 people's name down? And do you have it by your name that you're going to call all 5 of them, and do you have their telephone numbers? See, soon as you say to somebody in front of a group that they're to do something and that it's in writing, all of a sudden they feel different and they feel trapped, but they also know they need to do what they say they're going to do.
Well, a responder, a weakness of I'm not talking about a healthy one, because healthy ones are awesome.
That's right.
But the weakness of it is they're like, well, I don't feel like doing it anymore. I'm like, how could you not feel like doing it? Like, I don't understand that at all. Like, I have no comprehension in my brain. So how do you like tackle like being loving and kind to that, to try to pull them out of that?
Well, one of the things that I say to a couple of my responder friends is, isn't it wonderful that our spirit man is stronger than our emotions?
That is
Isn't it wonderful?
And I love
that
how
we
you do
can,
that with a smile.
Isn't it wonderful that we can choose to do something even if we don't feel like it, because it was a promise.
And see, she also realizes that some of those will not do it.
They still won't do it sometimes. But
And if you know that, you look at them and you say, now, if you find you're not going to do it or be able to do it, or you don't have the time, or it's just not something you feel called to do, if you would please remember to call me. Write that down. You write that down and have that.
Keep giving them responsibility.
But
things like that.
But make sure that you're encouraging them to write something down that ties back to you and to them, ties back to the circle of people, ties back to the circle of responsibilities. This is why this is called, wherever it is,
This wheel
right
wheel.
here, the success wheel.
Right.
Okay. So you guys have a team. You have the responder that is like not responding to work, and they keep like giving false promises. So how would you've had enough of that, and they're not doing more than they're doing. How would you tackle figuring out if they need to be on your leadership team still? How would you do it?
Well, if you chose to, say to them, look, I'd like for you to do this, but I'm also asking Joe, if you can count on Joe, or Mary, if you can count on Mary, to do it also with you. Now, if you find that you and Mary or you and Joe aren't able to do it, I'm going to just really give a lot of prayers to whether maybe Mary or Joe or you have reached that point where you want to be off of this team.
Wow, that's really good. That's nice too. What would be your
another thing? I would say that this was an important thing for me to learn, because it was hard for me to fire somebody or to get rid of people, because I just
You're positive. You want to think the best of them.
But what I learned is this, God has revealed to me that this is not the right place for you to be. And as long as I keep you here, I'm keeping you from finding the place that God wants you to be.
That's
so
good.
I want to release you now and pray with you so that you can find the place where God wants you to be.
Yeah.
Because it's the truth. If it's not right for the group, it's not right for you, then it's not right for that person. And the longer you keep them out of pity or whatever, the longer you're keeping them from finding God's will.
And you're getting more miserable.
Yes, yes.
Now, Anna told a young man that, who worked at our Christian bookstore and who never did much. But he showed up because he wanted his pay. And so when Anna met with him to discuss it with him, he said, you know, really what God's called me to do is to introduce people to the gospel. So he said, what I think you all should do is provide me 3 chairs or 4 to sit out on the porch and a coffee table to sit at. And Anna said, well, that's not a problem. We'll do it. She said, now, you know you don't get paid.
So sadly.
And you know that we don't want you in the store much.
Because what he was doing was he was witnessing to people but not helping them find the books or the literature. I said, we're in this community to get the gospel out.
Into their hands.
Into their hands, into their homes.
And for them to be responsible enough to pay for it.
Yes. So.
I love that. But as an influencer, sometimes you would feel bad. Did you feel bad afterwards?
Well, not after I realized the truth of that my keeping him was preventing him from getting.
And she also suggested he find other courses at Christ for the Nations to take.
I did. Go to Christ for the Nations and study and find out what God wants you to do.
Wow. Okay, so we went. Let's do Missy's now. Missy, you want to go
my
through
profile.
yours? Oh, wait a second. Before we do that, let's
Sure.
do this. Okay, the quick reference guide to the life languages. Do you guys want to go through this? This is also on your website and your bookstore.
It is. And what is amazing about this is it is a quick reference. So it's like every language, you find out what the character qualities are, what the number of people who speak that language, the filter, the need, the passion, the key character strength. Then you learn other character qualities, the distress flares. And then on this side of the page, it gives you clues for how to speak to this person. Visual clues, verbal clues, nonverbal clues, all the things you know to recognize what
all the
language,
things you need to know.
Yeah, to recognize what language is being spoken to you. Now, you don't want to say, I recognize that you're a responder. Because what you want to say is, I recognize that person is speaking responder. See, that could be the second language. Or I recognize this person is speaking shaper. That
Or it appears.
Yeah, it might be the second or third language, but that's the language you respond to. So as you learn these, this is just a quick reference guide that makes it so easy. It's like your little cheat sheet, that you've got.
And that's $15. We talked about that. That's a really good price for that.
It's laminated, and people just can use it forever.
Okay.
And it gives the distress flares, which really can be helpful. Distress flares, for instance, if you see a distress flare go up out of the ocean, you know there must be somebody down there who's in trouble.
Wow.
That's so good. I love how you guys communicate, even communicating.
Well, and then if you see a distress flare, like when I see Fred go into distress, I know what to do. Go to what his needs are and meet them.
Let me tell you how she can tell I'm in distress. I attacked, I demand, and then I attack.
But what he needs to feel significant or important or loved or motivated. He needs action and congruency. He needs for my words to line up with my actions. And if I have just been sitting around doing nothing, talking on the phone, doing whatever, and Fred is needing things done, and I've not been helping him do that, he'll go into distress.
Or we come to a meeting like this, and every time I want to say something, she keeps talking or takes over.
And then we say, who talks the most?
And then I look over and I see that Missy wants to talk. And so I kind of nudge her and look at Missy and look at Anna like that, and Anna just keeps talking.
So do you feel like you're in distress right now? No,
because I think he's giving me just a little affection. I didn't realize he was sending me a message.
Yeah, I'm sending her a message. Missy's wanting to say something.
No, I loved what you shared. That was really good what you shared. We do want to go on, but I loved what you shared about that. So anyway, and they can get this on the website.
That's right.
She knows that if I'm attacking her.
It keeps going up, the arm. So Missy, yours is a high. Well, go ahead. And
Yes,
say
let's
yours.
be kind here.
The movers need to be sensitive.
Oh. Yes. When I took their life language, I came out with a high mover in the 80s, between 1 and 100, because that's how they score. And then my shaper was in the high 80s. So they were virtually tied. And then my influencer and contemplator was in the 50s.
Tied, pretty much.
Yes. And the rest was very, very low, the rest of the languages.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So your mover and shaper are tied, and then your influencer contemplate. That's really pretty good. I mean, you've got all the languages in there.
And let me tell you
all
what
the categories.
what it really says.
The influencers just tell me I did good.
Let me tell you,
Thank you for being sensitive.
let me tell you what it really says. Now, did you know Mrs. Lindsay, who her and her husband started Crash the Nations?
I surely did.
Well, was she kind of a natural-born leader and a little bossy?
She was.
A little,
For
a
all
little.
you don't know, she's my grandmother. So
Well, see, what it tells us is you are a natural-born leader, and you are bossy,
And you'll make it happen.
and you'll
Now,
make it happen.
She
Now-
does.
And,
She's
and
really
you,
good at making it happen.
you are a person who should be in line to have a critical leadership position within the legacy that has been established here.
And you've got your influencer, which is still over 50, which is the diplomatic, tactful, that can come in and kind of massage the mover,
Motivator.
from being so
Okay.
strong. But your mover shaper, that's just definitely strong leadership. Make it happen through a plan. You're going to make things happen,
Which is great.
And you've got a plan to do
I
it.
always
She's
tell
got
her
the
she's one
courage.
of the best,
Yeah.
highest leaderships I've
Yes,
ever
yeah.
met.
It says you have a plan, but it also kind of implies that if they don't get with the plan, you're going to have a word for them.
Or you'll just take it over and change the plan because you're
Or
the
get
mover.
somebody else.
Yeah.
Or,
yeah.
or you'll get
right.
somebody else.
I'll get somebody else. I'll get 3 people doing the same thing just to make sure it got done.
There you
And
go.
I heard my grandmother did the same thing. And then they all found out they were doing the same thing when it got done.
It's whoever gets it done quicker. Then
That's what, yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Whoever
I realized
gets
I
it
was,
done quicker and best.
Yes, yes.
yes, but I don't tell each person that they're doing the same thing.
because
Well,
they'll
that's-
all stop.
And that's also where your influencer diplomacy comes in. You know how to be tactful.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
And you're probably becoming more tactful all the time with maturity and with level of leadership rising.
Now, your last language you said is doer, producer, or your last two.
Yeah.
So does that mean that you like to do practical things, or do you like to have somebody else do those, or do you like to start things
Hands-on.
and have somebody else finish it, or where are you in that? Because usually doers prefer to. They like the hands-on doing things.
But she's last language
I
doer.
know.
Well, I
Don't
like
put
to
words in her mouth.
I like to delegate.
Okay, that's the shaper.
I have to agree. She has so many people doing stuff for her. I'm like,
Okay.
Missy, how are they packing
and
your
you were putting words
suitcase
in her
for
mouth.
you? Like, how are they packing your suitcase? Like, so
God
I'm
told them to.
Yes. Well, that's good. But that's also, as a last language doer, that you wouldn't want to do that. So
Yeah.
God has brought people who will do that for you.
They
she
help me
has
out.
Such a gift. Like
'Cause I
I'm
have someone-
telling you, it's probably one of the highest gifts I've ever met personally in a person.
Really?
She has more people working for her. I'm like, how do you do this? How do
Yeah.
you get all these people? Like, it's like 5 people are helping her do like something. I'm like, I've never seen anybody do that before.
I
It's like
give
a
them things.
natural born leader.
And I'm going to tell you, if you had met her grandmother and spent time with her grandmother,
Yeah.
you
She
would,
did the same thing too?
She was the same way, and to the
Wow.
point that it used to irritate, possibly
Family members?
family members, because
We were
Granny
alike.
would call them over and get them doing.
Wow.
She would call me over
Yes.
and get me
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, what
And you didn't
wonderful
want to be
training.
told what to do, which is so funny.
Somebody had to submit, and it sure wasn't going to be her.
And guess what? Somebody must carry that legacy on.
Yes. There you go.
That's what I hear. God will have to show that.
Yes. Well, you're doing it beautifully. So, no, it's definitely mover, shaper, leader, diplomacy, and then contemplator being as high as it is. That means you also like to work from facts.
Yes.
You know, you prefer, I mean, your mover can make things happen. Your shaper can organize and be visionary. But you want to stop and do the research and have.
And
the
you want it
facts.
intellectually sound.
Yeah. Like
Intellectually sound.
when she teaches, like everything is like line upon line. She is factual. She'll have
Yes.
12 pages of
Yeah.
facts to one little point.
And make him laugh at the same time.
See, that's
Okay.
that's a great
Influence.
talent.
But-
Yes,
and,
yeah.
and let me tell you something that's personal for Ann and I. Ann and I, of all the people we know, you're probably in the very top of who we really admire and like.
Adore. We just adore.
I
Adore
love
you.
that.
Now,
Thank
we
you.
don't
love
say it to you
that.
often or anybody else, but we just
Yeah.
probably adore you as much as anybody we know.
If I'm out here or if Fred is out here, one of the things we each ask the other, if we're not together, is, "Did you see Missy?"
Aww.
It's
Her
always
love
just-
tank's going to be so full leaving here.
My parents would tell me, they would say that
Yeah.
if they got together for dinner or something
Yes.
like that.
Yeah, we
So I always
wanna
know since
about
I was a
you.
child.
Yeah.
I
Precious,
love
precious,
that. I
yes.
love that. Okay, so we are going to start wrapping up. And that was really
That
good.
was very kind.
That
Thank
was
you.
very good.
Factual.
Yeah.
Very factual.
I like that.
So what we want to talk about is, for our young prophets that have been watching, I mean, this was like a living room setting we just had. What are some ways that maybe they can, if they wanted to bring you guys in, do you guys travel doing
Yes,
this?
sure.
How would they connect, maybe bring you for their leadership team or a different nation, or, can you?
Absolutely. You can go to our website and leave a message, which is lifelanguages.com, or you can email me at ak@lifelanguages.com and just contact us and we'll start a dialogue. Fred and I were in several countries in Africa last year. We're old, but we still get around.
We're not old.
No. And of course, we love to travel and we love to do things together. Fred does men's conferences, I do women's, but we love it when we are both.
We
doing
like to
things
do
together.
conferences together, which include men and women.
That's true.
So you guys do marriages?
Oh yes,
that,
we do.
Well,
we do a lot of marriage
Well,
conferences.
we do marriage and we do family, but we also just do conferences where men and women are there about leadership.
Oh, that's
Because
great.
there's so many problems sometimes between husband and wives about leadership that it really helps to get it out in the open in a comfortable, reassuring way, and we can do that.
Yes, but here's what I want you to know. God wants us to communicate first with Him and then with one another. To do that, we need to know who He is, but we also need to know who we are, because each of us, we are very uniquely, wonderfully, differently created, and we don't see profiles that are alike. Even those that have their languages in the same order will have different intensities and different things like that. So He wants us to understand ourselves so that we can then understand one another. I made a statement earlier about what we don't understand, we tend to judge. This happens in marriages, in the workplace, in families, and we don't want to judge each other. We want to judge the fruit of someone, and we were given the license to do that from the Word, but not to judge one another and to be threatened by the differences. Differences should really pull us together and help us to balance one another. Fred and I have tremendous differences. We also do a crosstalk that measures how many differences you have. Fred and I have a lot, like 34, something like that. But we balance each other because we're so different. Now, you may have a crosstalk with someone with not very many differences, and that means you just flow together easily, and it doesn't take as much energy. So when you take our profile, there is no right or wrong answer. You just answer it as truthfully as you can, the way you are most of your life in most situations, and then the results will come forth.
So if they have say you have a leadership team, you would tell the leader to take it first, and then what would you
We
tell
really
with
wouldn't.
the rest? No? Take
No.
it all together?
Try to take it all at the same time. What you tend to have, and I recently was in a church where this occurred. I was with two of the key leaders, and there were about, talking to them, but there were about 10 other people right there with us. And this one leader lady, she was the senior pastor's wife, and she was thereby the senior pastor too.
Yeah.
She said, "Look, I've already taken it. If you like, I can just tell you all you need to know."
About everybody else. She had already judged everybody else in the
And
group.
she said, "I can tell you what you are." And see, that's like me holding my Bible that I have right here, having this
Yeah.
Bible, and telling you, you don't need to get a Bible. I
tell
can
you.
tell you all you need to know.
Yes. So the reason to just have everybody take it at once, and there is nothing embarrassing about it. There's nothing you can't share with other people.
And it's actually kind of fun.
It is
Yeah.
fun. It is a lot of fun. And so you just see your strengths, and we don't even talk about the weaknesses in the profile. That's kind of
Yeah.
done on an individual basis or,
Yeah.
or in a seminar or something. So you see your strengths,
Well-
and maybe you say, well, I'm not quite all of that, but you've got the potential to be everything that's in there.
That's
and we
awesome.
have such amazing potential, and God wants to release
Wow.
that in each of these young men and women so they truly will be world changers.
And
Wow.
if you were to ask me, what are the probably the three most important things that life languages could offer somebody, one would be to take the profile. That'd be the very first. That's the most lasting, and that's a starting place. The second would be then to maybe send for that little
Booklet.
Oh, the
booklet.
quick reference guide
quick
to life.
reference. Now you now know enough to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you send for it first, you really are using it in a very shallow way.
Yeah.
And then I think for me personally, next it'd be the Eagle series.
And that's on your website
And
also.
that's on our website. Now, what it means is you're not going to succeed in this life unless you identify the enemy, E.
Yeah.
And unless you have an authorization from God, angelic authority working in your behalf, you're not going to achieve goals, EAG. And if you're not doing it in love, you're not doing it Christ-like, EAGL. And if you do it in that manner, you then have become an example, and you're
this-
empowered.
This is our testimony because Fred has probably counseled about 15,000 couples.
Wow.
Because he's very old and he's done that for a long time. but seldom do we see anybody that had a marriage as bad as ours. And seldom do we today see anyone that has a marriage as good as ours. And that truly is the power of the Lord. We've been married 52 years, and we're going to go on for at least another 30. So
Yeah. Wow.
And this is based on two things, primarily biblical truths. But secondarily, it's based on what I learned as an infantry combat officer in the Marine Corps.
and how to fight the enemy.
You
how
can't
to
fight the enemy.
safeguard your marriage.
You can't
Wow.
fight the enemy till you identify the enemy. That's what the first E is about.
Yeah.
You can't fight the enemy as you don't identify it, and you need allies. That's what the A's are for.
Yeah.
And then the G, you need goals
And grace.
and grace.
Goals and grace.
Grace.
Well, we loved having you, Missy Lindsay, co-hosting with me here. We loved having you guys on here.
Yes.
There's no way we could just fit this in 2 hours. You guys were amazing to pull this all together. And if you want to connect with Fred and Anna Kendall, if you'd like them to come to your church or come overseas, you can go to lifelanguages.com. But thank
Yes.
you guys so much. I mean, you really touched my heart. I felt like I even grew some
Oh,
just
thank
listening
you.
to, and you know, all the research, all
Very
that you've
impacting.
done. Yeah,
Praise
so
God.
much.
Yes.
And thank you, Missy Lindsay, and thank you for joining us online. And I'm just so excited. Go to Life Languages, connect with them. You guys are on Facebook.
Yes.
Is there any other? Are you on Instagram or anything like that?
Oh,
No.
probably, yes.
So Facebook.
But you
and-
can find us, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
And you can
have-
always find us through Christ for the Nations.
and Christ
There
are the
you go.
Nations.
They're on our board.
So we loved having them, and thank you so much, and have a great weekend.
God bless you all.